Welcome to another scriptural study. As Bereans, we love to examine the scriptures doing word, name, and law studies, which include the scriptural calendar studies. And as such, we search the scriptures daily to see if these words are so. By doing this, it provides an excellent opportunity to further understand both the intensity, let alone frequency, of the birth pains. So, with this said, has the Lawless One just revealed himself? Because the Pope just announced he wants to change the Our Father prayer, which we can find in the book of Matthew chapter 6, verse 9 through 13. This proposed change is being made even though the scripture is clear that we are not to add and or take away from the word. The majority of news outlets on earth is sharing the details of what the Pope is suggesting to change, as per the link provided here. This is what he wants to take away from the scriptural words that exist today. He wants to take away the words, lead us not into temptation, and proposes to add the man-made non-scriptural words, do not let us fall into temptation. What does the original, lead us not into temptation, really mean? It depends on what kind of translation you are utilizing. The Greek verb in this passage, eisphero, means bring. So, quote, do not bring us into temptation, or lead us not into temptation, which are all literal translations. The change is being motivated due to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which very few know means the instruction book from the universal ecclesia. Did you catch that? They are not satisfied with calling themselves just an earthly institution, but a universal one. And as such, Article 2846 explains that the Almighty does not tempt anyone, which is scripturally true. As the book of Jacob, chapter 1, verse 13 states, quote, let no one say when he is enticed, I am enticed by the Almighty One, for the Almighty is not enticed by evil matters. He entices no one, end of quote. Okay, so far, so good. So, where is the problem? The problem lies in the fact that they leave out the previous verse when explaining the reason for their proposed change. It states, blessed or Baruch is the man who does endure trial, for when he has been proved, he shall receive the crown of life which the Master has promised to those who love him. As we can plainly see, this verse proves that we are indeed tested for a reason, and thus have an opportunity of being approved, which regrettably this Catholic proposed change leaves out. Furthermore, there is no explanation that we are actually tempted because of our own wrongdoings, as the following verse states, quote, but each one is enticed when he is drawn away by his own desires and trapped. Then, when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it has been accomplished, brings forth death. End of quote. Yes, we must be cautious, as the adversary is indeed seeking someone to devour. Even the Messiah, Yahushua, was tried by the devil. And yes, each one of us will experience the same hardships of being enticed and or tempted, especially when we are drawn away by our own desires and then trapped into sin, which when accomplished brings forth death. and why none of the Catholic representatives that are supporting this proposed change are sharing all of the scriptural verses, and thus another solid reason why we are not to add and or take away from the Word. Why is this so important? Because Scripture is clear that His people do not listen to His voice, and why the Almighty Father, Yahuwah Himself, will not tempt you, but He will indeed give you up if your heart is stubborn, because you will not listen to what He says about His way. Yahuwah and His voice is clear, as He speaks His own words of what we must do to live a quality life here and now, in order to receive our inheritance, as the first 4 commandments are how to love Yahuwah with all our heart, being, and mind. But as we know, the Catechism of the Catholic Church allows and practices idol worship with carved images, while eliminating the name which is above all names, and has obliterated the Sabbath. And thus why this proposed change places the responsibility of the Almighty Himself to ensure that we do not fall into temptation, when in fact the Scripture states that this responsibility falls on our own shoulders, to always listen to His voice and His word, to ensure that we personally do not become drawn away by our own desires. The word is clear. The Father in heaven will give us up due to a consistent, stubborn heart, and He will then give us up to walk in our own counsels, which always leads to death. This subtle and small but cunning proposed change proposes to put the responsibility of loving our neighbor as ourselves in Yahuwah's hands and not our own, and thus the final death blow and or another way to obliterate the law, because people now can say, the Almighty Father did not help me in loving my neighbor as myself, and this is why we sin. Welcome to the great falling away. But again, the voice of Yahuwah is clear. We do not have to follow the lawless, who add and take away from the word. And we do not have to remain stubborn about our own non-scriptural ways, because those still trapped in the stubbornness of the world have been given up to worship the host of heaven with a man-made calendar, rather than numbering their days with the true scriptural calendar. And because people in the world still do not listen to His voice, the Father does indeed give people over to their own stubborn heart to walk in their own counsels. Take a look at Romans chapter 1, verse 24. Because is it true that due to the stubbornness and pride of people, the world actually states that the Almighty One will give people up to uncleanliness in the lust of their hearts, to disrespect their bodies amongst themselves? Does the Scripture provide the details of what it means to be given up in regards to this scriptural subject matter, let alone what the reward is for straying? Even the Apostle Shaul warned us not to go back to our straying with the man-made pagan traditions of men. Read Mark chapter 7 with the same loving warning. Because there's simply no polite way of telling people they have dedicated their lives to an illusion, is there? Resistance is not futile. You do not have to be assimilated. One of the greatest tools of the devil is ignorance. Because, scripturally, if one does not have a love of the truth, the Almighty One will indeed send a working of delusion. And if one receives it, they will believe the falsehood. Why? Well, because it reveals who does indeed have a love of the truth and who does not. The ones that do not love the truth will constantly be delighting in the unrighteousness of the world. And all because people will not listen to his voice, as captured in his word. And why we will be given up to a stubborn heart, to walk in our own counsels. The timing of this proposed change is prophetic, as it highlights an attempt to provide a final death blow to the 10 words from a non-scriptural worldwide institution that falsely claims it's universal. No, nothing new under the sun here. Because isn't it true that this organization takes every opportunity to demonstrate lawlessness and how to be an anti-Messiah? Does this lawless organization and their fruit prove that they cannot hear evil, cannot see any evil, let alone speak any evil? The Our Father prayer is already correct. It needs no changes. Because Bereans that study scriptural words, names, and the law know that the Almighty Yahuwah leads and guides us to a watering place. He brings us to a place of rest to refresh, to either go and or come out of this world. Because isn't it our responsibility alone to listen to his voice, his words, in order to not be given up to our stubbornness due to our own desires to walk in our own counsel? Regardless if the lawless ones always attempt to put the blame of our non-scriptural desires on the Father of lights, Yahuwah himself. We continue to call upon the name that these scriptural word, name, and law studies, including the calendar, bring value to you and your loved ones. Until next time, Yahuwah willing, all the best to you and your loved ones in the name which is above all names.